Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank everyone who has joined the call today. It's so good to see everybody out there virtually. And while the pandemic and the weather has prevented us from being together in person, we can still join together to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So again, I want to welcome everyone to HCTC's annual celebration to celebrate Dr. King. And a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording this meeting today so that we can put the link back out there for those who may not be able to join today. We have Donna Roark, our Chief Information Officer. I want to give Donna a big thank you because she is running the show today. We do ask that if you are not presenting, that you keep your camera off and your mic muted just so that everyone can concentrate on the speakers. I want to thank our equity and inclusion team at HCTC because they have done a wonderful job organizing this event. Again, we had planned it in person, but we were unable to do so. But hopefully we can be in person next year. But I do want to thank the Equity and Inclusion team, especially the chair, Professor Ramon Quillar, and you will be hearing from him later on today. So the theme for today is It Starts With Me. And I just really love that theme because we are all able to promote positive change if we portray that positive change and if we work toward that. And we do have two dynamic speakers today who have done just that. They have really promoted positive change in their community, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. So let me get to it. Our first speaker is Ty Vinson. Ty is a junior at Perry County Central. He is an all-A student athlete who participates in track and field, and he plays football. He's the son of Gary Vinson and Jamie Cottle of Hazard, and he's the brother of Kima Vinson. He's enrolled at Hazard Community and Technical College. We're proud to have him in our dual credit program, and he plans to major in sports medicine. So let me close out and we will turn it over to Ty.
Good morning, everybody. I would just like to thank every single one of you for giving me this opportunity to speak. As I said a couple of days ago, anytime that I get a chance to talk about change, I feel like I need to because I am a young person in this area. So it's great to be here. It's great to be here. I'll begin now. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, as a middle child of Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. He was born into a financially secure middle-class family, so he received better education than the average African-American child. King attended David T. Howard Elementary and had a complex understanding of the world growing up. He attended Booker T. Washington High School, where he was said to be an intellectual child. He skipped the 9th and 11th grades and attended Morehouse College in Atlanta at the age of 15. At Morehouse, he was called an underachiever by his teachers and was not really motivated. He wasn't satisfied by church and religion and became uncomfortable with the teachings of religion. He decided not to go into ministry, and his father, who was a pastor, was disappointed. In his junior year, however, at Morehouse, he began taking a Bible class, renewed his faith, and began to think about a ministry career. In 1948, he earned his sociology degree at Morehouse and decided to attend Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. He was a great student while at Crozer, as he was named the valedictorian of his class in 1951 and became the first African-American student body president in their school. He earned a fellowship for graduate study while also attending Crozer. In his last year at Crozier, Morehouse College President Benjamin E. Mays told King to use Christianity as a driving force for social change. He attended Boston University for his doctorate, met his wife Coretta Scott, married her in 1953, and had 4 children with her. King became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church of Montgomery, Alabama. He earned his Ph.D. at Boston University in 1955 at the age of 25. King's first chance of social change was the Montgomery bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott started after the incident involving Rosa Parks. She refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger when the bus driver told her to, and she was arrested. On the night she was arrested, Ed Nixon, who was the leader of the local NAACP chapter, met with Dr. King and other activists to plan a bus boycott. King was chosen to lead the boycott because he came from a good family and had few enemies. In his first speech, he explained that there was nothing they could do but protest for justice and freedom. This put a great energy in the civil rights battle in Alabama as the bus boycott lasted for 382 days. The African American community in Alabama were intimidated as they were harassed, violated, and had to walk to work during all 382 days. The African American community took action against the city, and this became a successful decision as the city lifted the law of segregated public transportation. In 1963, Dr. King organized a protest in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. City police dogs and fire horses were turned on protesters. King and several of his supporters were put in jail, and he was getting blamed by folk for endangering the children who attended the protest. In his famous letter to the Birmingham jail, he spoke on his take on nonviolence. He explained that nonviolent acts create a crisis and a tension so strong that a community is forced to face an issue. Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech was made on August 28, 1963, at the historic March on Washington in front of 200,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial. In his iconic and well-known speech, he states, "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." This speech was so powerful that the public opinion of civil rights were affected strongly. People that weren't experiencing racial tension began to question the Jim Crow laws and the treatment of African Americans. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, outlawing discrimination in publicly owned facilities. Due to this, King received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. After receiving this award, however, his work was not done. On March 9, 1965, 2,500 members set out to cross the Pettus Bridge and confronted barricades and state troopers. Instead of forcing any violence, Dr. King led his followers to kneel in prayer, and after they turned back. On March 25th, an estimated 25,000 people gathered in front of the state capitol where Dr. King gave a televised speech. 5 months after the peaceful protest, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act. During the late 1965 through 1967, Dr. King expanded his civil rights efforts to bigger cities like Chicago and Los Angeles. This was a challenge as he was forced with criticism and public challenges from young Black Power leaders. Dr. King was patient and nonviolent, and the Black Power leaders viewed his tactics as weak, too late, and ineffective. He began addressing this criticism by making a link between discrimination and poverty, and began speaking out against certain things such as the Vietnam War. He broadened his views by forming a multiracial coalition to address the economic and unemployment problems of all disadvantaged people. In 1968, Dr. King was worn out by the many marches, confrontations, and living under constant fear of death. He became discouraged at the slow pace of the civil rights in America and the criticism he was facing by other African American leaders. A plan for another march on Washington were in the works to revive his movement and to bring attention to other issues. In the spring of 1968, a strike by Memphis sanitation workers sparked King into making one last statement. On April the 3rd, he gave his final speech at the Mason Temple in Memphis. He told his supporters that he's seen the promised land, and even if he doesn't get there with them, they will all be there together. The next day, on April 4th, he was standing on his balcony outside of his room at the Lorraine Motel and was killed by a sniper's bullet. The man that killed him was a former convict named James Earl Ray. Ray pleaded guilty in 1969 and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Dr. King's death sparked riots in more than 100 cities around the country. To this day, Dr. King is recognized as one of the best civil rights activists in U.S. history. And again, I appreciate everybody that gave me this opportunity to speak in front of these wonderful people. And he is a very important part of my life, and I'm trying to tell other people about how good he was in the ministry as well as for social change. That's all I have, but I appreciate everybody that's been here today and listened to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ty. We have some wonderful up-and-coming young leaders, and Ty Vincent is a perfect example of one of those up-and-coming young leaders. And Ty, we appreciate the information. You did a very thorough job, a wonderful job, and I'm sure that Dr. King would have been proud. You did a wonderful job honoring his life and legacy. So thank you, Ty. So our next speaker, let me pull up his introduction, is Mr. Jonathan Beatty. Jonathan Beatty is a Hazard, Kentucky native and founder of I Love Books, an apparel brand that's based on a mission to end illiteracy. Before launching the brand in March 2021, Jonathan spent more than a decade as an award-winning finance manager for global companies such as Procter & Gamble, McKesson, and Amazon. His passion for literacy began years ago when he learned most children from low-income families do not have access to a single book in their home. He was inspired by this injustice, and he realized his life's purpose is to ensure all young people have access to books and can identify as readers. Jonathan created I Love Books to solve the global illiteracy crisis and inspire young people around the world. And we're proud to have Jonathan here with us today.
All right. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, Dr. Linden. Thank you to the faculty and staff at HCTC. Thank you to young Ty and the Equity and Inclusion Committee who put this event together today. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to everyone who is tuning in and watching, especially my nieces and nephew. As a proud Hazard, Kentucky native, it's always a privilege and an honor to support my hometown, whether it's in person or virtually. So Dr. King said that everyone can be great because anyone can serve. And I believe that that's a very powerful statement. In fact, I believe that our whole purpose here on earth is to serve others. And the way that we go about serving others is by identifying our gifts, cultivating our gifts, and then serving those gifts back to the world. This introspective process allows us to become the best version of ourselves. And by becoming the best version of ourselves, we can inspire others to do the same. Whether your gift is teaching, baking, reading, leading, educating, whatever the case is, I encourage you to explore that love, become what you want to be. And by doing that, you can change yourself. And ultimately, by changing yourself and us changing ourselves, we can change the world. So I come from a corporate background, which means that it has to be more than just saying change yourself and become the highest version of yourself. I think that in order to achieve a goal, you got to have some practical tips, some practical advice that helps you achieve the mission. So today I want to share 4 principles that have helped me along my journey to become the best version of me and fulfill my personal legend, as Paulo Coelho would say. And I hope that these 4 principles can help you as well. As we're talking about change, we could talk about the importance of what I call the 4 agreements. The title of the book is The 4 Agreements. It's written by a man, his name is Don Miguel Ruiz, and it is a global bestseller. And I believe that it's a global bestseller for a reason. And I just want to bring to you a few of those agreements and let you know what I've taken from them in my life and how I think you can apply them in your life as well. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Growing up, my father would always say that there's life and death in the tongue. And as a child, I didn't quite understand exactly what that meant. But as I've grown older and continued to progress on my journey, I realized that we have a choice. We can either speak life and light into others, or we can speak darkness and death. Now, the word is extremely powerful. In the beginning was the word. You hear a lot of people talking about manifesting and speaking things into existence. So that lets you know that what you say holds weight in the universe. Personally, I've heard a lot of people say that you need to say what you mean and mean what you say, but I believe that this is much deeper than that. It's important to speak goodness, positivity, love, light into others, but I think it's even more important to speak that into ourselves. A lot of us struggle with negative self-talk. We beat ourselves up. We condemn ourselves. We speak in a very poor way against ourselves, and that isn't helpful. Again, in order to become the best version of yourself, you have to actually believe and speak the best version of yourself. You have to start with the belief. That's the first agreement. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. Now, as a Black man coming from Southeast Kentucky, a lot of you can imagine some of the things that I've been told or that have been said to me throughout my life, not just as a young man, but even as I've gotten older. But what I've realized is it's also my choice on whether I'm going to take the poison that someone speaks to me or if I'm going to make myself immune to the opinions and the actions of other people. This agreement allows you to limit the amount of drama that you may experience, limit the amount of sadness that you may experience based on what other people say or do. As an example, if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, most of us take it personally, like they're doing that to us. But what if they're on their way to the hospital to check on a loved one? The way that we go about thinking determines how we feel, and how we feel determines how we act. So it's very important to understand that not taking things personally is one of the many ways that you can navigate in a positive way through your journey. The third agreement, and I believe this is probably the most important, is don't make assumptions. The human imagination is extremely powerful, and humans in general don't like the unknown. So what happens when we don't know something? Our imagination starts to fill in the gap. Unfortunately, if you have a negative assumption, you've made up a negative story. That story may not even be true. It could be the furthest thing from the truth. But if you don't check it, if you're not aware and become intentional about making sure you're not making negative assumptions in particular, then you can be the victim of useless and needless suffering. So not making assumptions allows us to really limit, again, the drama that we would feel, the sadness that we would feel from other people based on our internal stories that we're telling ourselves. It's also important in the sense of communication. So asking questions can sometimes be difficult. A lot of us may fear asking difficult questions. So you have to have the courage to ask the right questions and also express yourself and what you need or want. The combination of all of this allows you to not make assumptions and again, navigate much more smoothly through this personal journey. The fourth and last agreement is always do your best. I have a lot of nieces, nephews, godkids, and I always tell them, always do your best. And I'm sure you may do the same. But this agreement is much deeper than that. Understanding that doing your best can vary from moment to moment, year to year, season to season, allows you to mitigate self abuse, negative self talk, and also regret. So, an example that I'll give you is I love the sun and I love long days. During this time of year, it can be a challenge because I have what's called seasonal affective disorder. I cannot expect myself to perform the way that I do in the middle of summer, the way that it is right now with the snow and the cold and the short days. That allows me to show self-compassion and empathy and not beat myself up unnecessarily. That also allows me to move smoothly, positively, and continue to speak love and light into others. Those agreements, when used together, can be life altering, and my life is an example of that. I try my best to live by these principles, and I'm also on a mission to make sure other people have this knowledge so that they can also live their best life, so to speak. I'll end with a quote by Dr. King, who said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." My plea with you today as we celebrate Dr. King is to be the light and to be the love. Inspiration and inspiring is the highest human act. And I hope that by becoming the light and by showing love to everyone, we can all make our own impact in the world. Thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Happy Dr. King Day. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. Such powerful words and principles to live by. And I hope that we can all take the information that he gave us and take that out into how we live our lives and how we work and how we interact with each other. So, Mr. Beatty, we're very pleased that you are representing Hazard and representing Southeastern Kentucky and our communities out there in the world. Thank you again for being with us today. Another powerful, positive person we have in our community is Miss Ladrenia Hagan Shepherd, and she has been with the college for many years. Anyone who knows Ladrenia loves her. She is one of our nursing instructors at the college, and she is providing critical instruction to students who will go out in the world and take care of us. So each year, when we have this celebration, Ladrenia does talk about and honor our African American educators in the local area. So I will turn this over to her and she can give you a little bit of information about what she's about to do.
Well, as I listen to who I call my young representatives speak, they speak of the life I started with as a young person coming to HCTC, which was HCC at the time that I came to Hazard Community and Technical College in 1987. And it was very important to me about being the most positive change and showing, demonstrating, explaining to my community, especially my African American community, that we can do this. We can be a positive, make a positive interest into the college. We can be successful because this is our home. This is where we live and we represent. So if we are here, we're going to be demonstrating what is expected of any other college in the world, in the state. And so we're here for you to see that you can do it. These persons that brought us to this point were very important persons. In a different time, there were African American teachers and African American schools built separately from our other schools in the community. How would they stand up? How did they stand up? There were several in our communities. Our teachers, African American teachers, were local teachers who gained their education through Kentucky State. Some went to the University of Kentucky. And I learned about the local effects of the integration from segregation right in our HCTC library. I had oral history from the time that I can remember as a young person at home, because my dad taught us African American history. We had a book, he would pull it out, and he would tell us about the African American people who made the greatest ventures in the life of the U.S. being established. We enjoyed that. Their experiences in starting school was different than us starting school. My first grade was spent out of state, and I've heard other faculty, staff persons in our KCTCS, I will call it the leadership system office, talk about going out of state to a different school. My reasons for going out of state to Indiana to school was to allow me to be with other African American children. In the community where I was to go to school, there was not one, and my dad did not want me walking half a mile out the holler, getting on a bus, going another half a mile to a school where there was no one but me. So that was his decision. So I spent my first grade in Indiana going to school, which that school is still there. My teacher has long since passed, but I have had the opportunity to revisit and experience the feeling and walking to and from. And it was a very emotional time for me, but one that I personally got to do. In our area, when I came back to second grade, I had my sister, my two cousins, and it was a new experience for me in school. It was a good one. The many students that I started with in second grade are still my besties, I can call them that. And I got to be the teacher in teaching my fellow classmates on the playground, or I got to be the big bad wolf in chasing them around the playground. And it was a good experience for me. At the same time, I had some of my classmates who were name callers and who talked about my pigtails. And it was funny at the time. I didn't understand it. I thought it was funny. But I had a classmate who was very strong about her feelings and talking about me. And she came to school one day with long pigtails hanging down. She had very long hair. So she came to school one day with long pigtails hanging down her back. And we ran around the playground and played, and it was so happy, for my first year at Yellow Creek, as we called it, but it was Sassafras Elementary. So through my lifetime, I got to experience many changes. I began to, I had the experience of one African American teacher who was a distant relative when I entered Car Creek High School. And his name was Mr. Goodlow Adams. He was my first. And I did feel odd. I really did. And that helped me to understand how other students would feel. And whenever they talked to me about that, that was something that we all felt. So it wasn't something that I was having all to myself. It was a shared feeling. So I began to explore, where are our African American teachers? Where did they come from? And I found out that we had several distinguished African American educators. Two main one-room grades, 1 through 8 schools, were in Knott County. They were the Bradings Creek Colored School in Red Fox, of which these teachers were Mr. Lewis Hagens, Mr. Elmer Williams, Mr. John Higgins, Mr. Andrew Williams, and Mr. Goodlow. Now, Mr. Goodlow was the last teacher of the segregated period. His wife, Molly, taught at Liberty in the Perry County system. The Perry County system had Liberty High School that was upstairs, and Liberty Grade School was downstairs. And as most of our local people know, that school is, has left a memory stone in its place on Liberty Street. So anyone can go and read the names and memorize or stand in the moment of what some of our former classmates went through in going to school there. And as they became those who were integrated into the system, understand their experiences. When Mr. Goodlow left the Bradings Creek Colored School, he taught at Car Creek Elementary School. Now, you think of a person who has taught grades 1 through 8 and taught them all grades, all courses, to be sent to another school to teach health and PE. Now, integrated into the school system, this is what we have for you to do. He walked around, and some of my older, I'm going to say, former classmates, my African American persons who had experienced him as a teacher of many courses, many grades, the most humbleness that he demonstrated when teaching health and PE at the Car Creek Elementary School. He went from the Car Creek Elementary School to Car Creek High School. And he demonstrated that same humbleness, I want to call it that, as the other students mentioned. And that I say, walking with curved shoulders and a downcast look in the classroom and going to and from classes and leaving. And I felt like it was burdensome, for him. Sometimes his spirits would lift and his head would be up when talking about civics, because he taught civics, at the high school. So I got to experience that from him. The other schools in the area were Perkins Boland or Wisconsin, and this school was at Yellow Creek. It was above the Sassafras Elementary School. And the teachers there were Miss Overstreet, Miss Maisie Beauclair. She was brought in from Frankfort. Miss Ovetta Basie and Mr. Roy Higgins. The schools in Perry County were Higgins High School at Vico, built by the work of George Higgins, who traveled to Frankfort to assure that a high school would be built on land provided in Vico, Kentucky. Mr. Roy Higgins continued to teach at the Higgins High School along with Mr. A.D. Pereira, his wife, Miss Susie Pereira, and Mr. John Willie Combs, who joined them. From the Higgins High School, the second school was built on Liberty Street, where children went to the Liberty School with the lower grades on the bottom, as I had previously said, and the high school was upstairs. There was a home economics room across from it. The teachers became Miss Ovetta Basie, Miss Molly Adams for the lower grades, Professor Pereira, who taught history and coached their team. Miss Virginia Williams came to teach from Georgetown. Professor Carl Walker was the principal. Miss Edna Arnold was the home economics teacher, and the lunchroom helper was Miss Hampton, who was the cook. There was Miss Lovice Cannon, and then Miss Jones, and that was Miss Callie McGuire's mom. There were other schools in Perry County, such as Harverton, which was taught the 1st through the 8th grade by Miss Florence Zimmerman. Schools in Blue Diamond, Tribby, and Hardburley. Now, I have lived with all of my life, and especially whenever I come to talk about our African American teachers in our area, is that I have never, that I remember, spoke of my grandmother. My grandmother taught school at Harverton, my mother's mother. Her name was Mrs. Leela King Warren. She died at an early age in her 40s, leaving my mother and brothers and sisters to be raised by my mom and dad and by my aunts and uncles. So she has, through my mother's voice, talked about the excellent teacher that she was at Harverton. So I share, and I don't want to say genes, but I share the most important part of the life of a teacher and how we teach to our students, how we welcome our students, no matter what level they are on, to assist them to become successful from wherever they are to wherever they need to be. So whenever we say, it starts with me, it starts with me. When you step into my classroom, it starts with me. Because if I'm not there, I'm not there. Where are they? And I tell my students, if I have no students, then why am I here? So I want to express to them their importance and what they can be to bring others from behind them to meet, exceed, and go beyond what they can do for others. Now, your teaching is in the classroom, it's in the hospital, it's in long-term care, it's on the street, it's at the Walmart. So wherever you are as a teacher, you express who you are. So you demonstrate from inside of you what you want and expect of your students. So as my former African American teachers joined their peers in other schools to teach the students in our areas, they demonstrated to them the excellence that is expected of our community, no matter African American or no, that we expect our community to be successful in our areas. That has been my dream since 1987, entering into Hazard Community College, to be the best that I can be and to be the best that HCC has to offer. So I join you all in saying that it starts with me. I want to thank you all again for allowing me to demonstrate and to talk about, to memorialize our former African American teachers, because that's what they mean to us. Thank you, Dr. Linden. Thank you, Mr. Quayler, and the rest of my equity and inclusion team. We are a team.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Hagen-Shepherd. You know, if you're not inspired by now, I don't know what. I'll tell you, I'm inspired. We've had such amazing speakers thus far in the event, and it makes me want to go sign up for a nursing class. You can see Professor Hagen-Shepherd, she's world class, and like all of our speakers have demonstrated, it does. It starts with me. It starts with you. It starts with us working together as a team. So it was wonderful to get the history there of our educators, our Black educators in the local area. Such a rich history. Normally when we're in person, we have a candelabra and we light a candle for each educator. But this was wonderful. We were able to get much more in depth with the history, and I appreciate that, Ladrina. I do want to talk about another event that is coming up at noon today. I believe we have the link that we've emailed out to our faculty and staff. It's also on our social media, but please join the community in another event today at noon if you're able to. Speaker Valerie Cornett will be making a presentation at around noon today, and the event is sponsored by the Southeast Kentucky African American Museum and Cultural Center, and I'm sure that it will be another inspiring event. So if you're snowed in today, we have lots of celebrations for you. And on behalf of Hazard Community and Technical College, as the president of HCTC, again, thank you for joining our event today. Next, we will have Evelyn Hudson, and she is one of our librarians at HCTC, and she's going to tell you about some of the resources our library has if you want additional information and if you've been inspired by today. We have much more inspirational material for you. So, Evelyn, I believe you're on here.
Yes, I am. Hello. Hello, my name is Evelyn Hudson, and I am HCTC Library's Reference and Instruction Librarian. The library director, Kathy Branson, and I wanted to contribute some supplemental resources relevant to the topic of MLK and his mission. In addition to creating a display on site at both our library locations in Hazard and Jackson, we wanted to create something that not only was locally relevant, but also gave a platform to marginalized voices. We looked to our Appalachian Oral History Project collection for inspiration. The collection is comprised of over 1,250 interviews from 1971 until 1984 by Lee's College, which is now a campus of HCTC. They were conducted by these Lee's College students. They selected individuals from their communities to interview about life before and during the Great Depression and World War II era. They interviewed their grandparents, their neighbors, and their teachers. Lee's College partnered with Alice Lloyd College, Emory and Henry College, and Appalachian State University at the inception of the Appalachian Oral History Project, and each college now houses their own unique local collections of oral histories from this project. For this presentation, we built upon prior work by Kathy, Brownie Wallace, and others who had sought out African Americans in this collection and their stories of life in Appalachia during this time, a time before the Civil Rights Act, from the Jim Crow days and school segregation, the days of the Rosenwald schools, and the days when the day law was enacted. We present 6 Black Appalachians whose stories are vital to understanding not only our local communities in Appalachia, but to understanding our present, ourselves, and the necessity of preserving Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision. The link for the presentation will be shared in the chat if that's possible. If not, we can find another way to get that link out. And that link will be accessible even after the event for the foreseeable future. We encourage everyone afterwards to listen to these stories. They're all linked through the Kentucky Digital Library, the online home of the Lee's College collection of the Appalachian Oral History Project interviews. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my director, Kathy Branson. We'd be happy to answer any questions. And I've got that link. However is the best way to share that. Maybe I can get up with Miss Donna or Dr. Linden, and we can get that out. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Evelyn. You may be able to put it in the chat, or you may be able to send it to Donna, and she may be able to put it in the chat. So I'll let you two chat about that. So again, thank you all so much for being here today. We do have closing comments from our chair of our Equity and Inclusion Committee, Professor Ramon Quillar. He is a pioneer in chemistry instruction at the college, and I say that because we have done so much along the lines of our science classes in putting things on the web, online, on our Blackboard educational platform for students. And Professor Quillar has just really been inspirational to us all in making science, in particular chemistry, possible online. He gets students from all over the state and other states who enroll for his classes, and they get a nice set of equipment, and they do their chemistry experiments at home. And I know that might be a little bit scary, but Professor Quillar works with them and makes sure that everything is safe for them. He is inspirational in other ways as well, again, leading our Equity and Inclusion Committee and being very active and an advocate for safety at our college. And we are pleased to have him at HCTC. So I will turn it over to you, Professor.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'd like to reiterate a lot what was said today. And it always says it starts with me. How profound the words Dr. Martin Luther King said to us when it's first stated that, because it comes from the heart in terms of we can look at the world both positive or both negative. Again, it starts with me. If we look at the word positive, we can be a good asset to the world. If we look at the negative, we can also be a detriment to the world. This committee is a advisory committee to the president and to the college. And I would like to take the time to say thank you to everybody who was involved in this situation. For example, Dr. Linden, without her leadership, without her guidance, today would not be possible. I also like to say thanks to Mr. Ty Vincent for his inspiring young words. I'd also like to say thank you to Mr. Jonathan Beatty, very touching words. Ms. Ladrina, always a pleasure. Miss Betty and Miss Branson always puts excellent work out there. Also like to thank Miss Donna for all her technological asset that she brings to this meeting. Of course, we have Miss Holliday, Miss Feltner, for your publicity that you give to this committee. To Dee, to Vicky, Scott, Miss Bentley, Miss Mecca, Miss Emily Hudson, Professor Moon, Mr. Joe Palumbo, Miss Robinson, Dr. Danielle King, and Miss Jenny Williams. Thank you for all you contribute to this committee, because without you guys, we're nothing. Again, it starts with me. If we don't take on a role actively in our society, our society will no longer be what it needs to be. And therefore, it starts with me. And this is where I was asked to chair this committee. Again, I always say, without the people that supports us, there's no committee. Without our students, as Ms. Ladrina says, we're no teachers. Therefore, it starts with me. So with that, I would like to say thank you for joining us today, for these inspiring words from these marvelous people, and for all the people that worked in the background, for the hard work that you did. Thank you. And with that, Dr. Linden, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you to everyone who has been able to join us today. I hope that you will be able to join the other community event. It will be equally as inspiring at noon with Miss Valerie Cornett. We will be putting our recording link out there so that if you had someone who missed it and you want to show this to them, you'll be able to do so. And we hope to see you in person next year, and we hope to also host many more equity and inclusion events at the college. So I'm looking forward to moving forward with everyone. And yes, as everyone has said, it does start with us, and we can promote positive change, and we can be the light instead of the darkness in our students' lives and in the lives of others around us. So thank you again. Bye-bye.